Hello and welcome to Projector, and on this episode, Guillermo del Toro reanimates the classic horror of Frankenstein. In the Arctic, the crew of the Danish ship Horizon find the wounded Victor Frankenstein, played by Oscar Isaac, and bring him on board. Frankenstein tells his story to Captain Anderson, played by Lars Mikkelsen, and how he became obsessed with trying to conquer death after the passing of his mother and attempted to reanimate the dead. But when Victor succeeds, he becomes disillusioned with the creature he has made, played by Jacob Elordi, and suffers the terrible consequences of playing God. Mary Shelley may have only been 18 when she wrote Frankenstein, but she created one of the seminal texts of modern horror, one which has been adapted numerous times and inspired countless others. Del Toro remembers as a kid seeing the famous 30s film with Boris Karloff and immediately identifying with the creature as a, quote, misfit freak, even saying that he was his messiah. And adapting Frankenstein to the screen has been a passion project for Del Toro for decades. He's spent so long trying to get it to the screen that it's a miracle he's finally got it made. It's not surprising that he's been so passionate about doing his own take on it, because it's all about sympathy for the monster, and that has been a theme that has run through his work like a stick of rock. From Hellboy to Pan's Labyrinth to Shape of Water, he's always found humanity in what frightens us, and humanity capable of being monsters. A version of Frankenstein is the most on-brand Del Toro thing imaginable, and unsurprisingly given its long development, it feels like a culmination of his work today, containing so many of his recurring ideas, but also in the way that it comes full circle to what inspired him in the first place. But despite being a core text, Frankenstein has rarely been adapted to the screen faithfully. Probably the version that has been closest is obviously Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, which I do have some affection for, but is a very flawed movie and a quite troll production. Kenneth Branagh directed that as a big bombastic vanity project and got quite carried away with himself, to the point where I would argue that it's like the tale being told by Victor. While Del Toro's film does bear some obvious similarities, the difference when comparing the two is that his film feels like the tale being told by the creature. But while this is more faithful to the spirit of Shelley's book, it does have a number of significant changes and deviations from the source material. It's Del Toro reinterpreting the text, fusing himself and Shelley together, and engaging and expanding on the big ideas of death, creation and family, and especially fatherhood in Del Toro's case, is a deeply personal film in every sense. And while I can't claim to have watched every version of this tale, I believe that Del Toro's take is arguably amongst the best that I've seen. Maybe not the definitive version, but certainly richly rewarding. If revisiting the source material but putting his own stamp on it sounds familiar, then that's because that's the approach that he took to his last Netflix collaboration, his stop-motion adaptation of Pinocchio. And watching Del Toro's Frankenstein, I was genuinely surprised at how much the two films echo each other, but perhaps I shouldn't have been. In a way, it's Del Toro telling the same themes, one for families and one for adults. His take on Pinocchio was all about fathers and sons, and so too is Frankenstein. Charles Dance plays Victor's father Leopold, a celebrated surgeon and a rather brutal father figure. He's very strict with Victor, played as a boy by Christian Convery, who you might recall was excellent as twins in The Monkey, and he wants Victor to follow in his footsteps, but acts coldly towards him. It's not even the first time that Dance has played Frankenstein's father, as he previously played the role in 2015's Victor Frankenstein. Not that I really care, because Charles Dance is usually a delight and is perfectly cast in a small but pivotal role. Leopold much prefers his more even-tempered little brother William, played by Felix Camera as an adult. William even says of his brother, "I was the calm, he was the storm." Victor has a much better relationship with his mother Claire, played by Mia Goth, but her death giving birth to William begins his obsession with trying to defeat death itself. Her passing marks him. Literally, she smears him with blood as she's being carried away. and red becomes a recurring motif throughout the rest of the film, both in the frequent bloodletting, but also as a manifestation of Victor's madness. He's haunted by visions of the Red Angel, as he calls it, this twisted version of his mother, tempting him to try and stop death. It's a bold image, but it also serves as a dark reflection of the blue fairy, or the wood sprite from Pinocchio, that brings the boy to life. As you might recall, Del Toro gave the sprite a sister in the form of Death, and the Red Angel is like both amalgamated. Victor blames his father for failing to save her, and his anger at the loss and Leopold's lack of approval drives his need to surpass him. They will not simply delay death, he will end it permanently. By the time that Isaac steps in as adult Victor, he plays the role with a brash energy and mania. He's charismatic and dark, brilliant, and yet totally arrogant to that fact. Isaac's reintroduction after the prologue exemplifies this, as Victor demonstrates his research with a crude upper torso stitched together from two different corpses, which catches a ball in its hand. It looks visually reminiscent of Ivan the Corpse in Hellboy, and there's something quite disturbing about the way he reanimates it with these rods that he stabs into it, especially the way that he turns it off by pulling out the rod in its chest, and it howls in pain as it returns back into being deceased. It's a scene that demonstrates Victor's brilliance and casual inhumanity all at the same time. The fundamental irony of Victor is that his whole quest is about creating life, but he has very little appreciation or respect for it. Christoph Waltz plays Henrik Harlander, a character newly invented for this film, but is inspired by Dr. Waldman, a wealthy arms manufacturer who gives unlimited funds to Victor after seeing his potential. Henrik has his own motivations, it later turns out, but he is for a while a perfect partner for Victor in that he's just as bitterly ironic, a man who profits from death, who uses seemingly endless money that he receives from it to try and stop it. Harlander also brings in niece Elizabeth, played by Goth in her main role, who is engaged to William. She is fascinated and appalled by Victor and his recklessness, and Victor clearly has feelings for his brother's fiancée, but they're definitely not reciprocated by her. There's a scene in a confessional where he tries to hide, and she identifies him immediately, and that kind of reminded me of a similar scene in The Mask of Zorro, except in this case they have a kind of anti-chemistry. Casting Goth in both roles does mean that Victor's desire for Elizabeth has a certain Oedipal complex, but it also makes a certain amount of sense because Goth does bring a certain maternal side to the role, especially in some of her later interactions with the creature. Until the creature arrives, Elizabeth is the film's most sympathetic character, serving as the audience surrogate in that she is the most attuned to the injustices and brutality that Victor tries to hide in his idealism. Her compassion makes her the film's heart and moral centre, even if she's unable to break through Victor's obsession despite being what he yearns for, but cannot have. And in trying to end death and go against the natural order of things, Victor only brings pain and suffering upon himself and everyone that he cares for. But when Victor finally gives life to his creature, that's when the daddy issues really come to the forefront. After the creature is first animated, while Victor is initially excited about how everything is new to it, he soon becomes disenchanted, especially as his goal was to achieve reanimation, but he didn't know or plan for what came after. Victor is particularly incensed that his creature only keeps repeating his name over and over. Victor! Victor! And the more it does so, the more it cries for his love and attention because it looks up to him, the more he resents it. Of course, as we know, Victor didn't have a nurturing father figure, and that's where he learns his malfunctioning parenting from, and the film's themes of parenthood are about that generational pain. Victor is doomed to inevitably repeat his father's mistakes of being an intellectual, but emotionally distant, and I think it's every parent's fear that you've imprinted your own pain onto your offspring. And once Victor rejects the creature as a failure, he treats it very inhumanely, chaining him up and brutalising him because he's aware that it doesn't know any better, something which Elizabeth directly points out. Victor doesn't see the humanity in his creation and nurture it, and instead punishes it for his failures, and he only realises this when it's too late. This fatherhood theme was a major part of Pinocchio before it, where again Geppetto pushed the puppet boy away and spends the whole film trying to atone for it. One of the fascinating connections between the two films is that Pinocchio and the creature become effectively immortal and unable to die. This is a significant deviation from Shelley's book in that the creature now has a regenerative ability, but it speaks to the themes that Del Toro is working with. Both the creature and Pinocchio are born out of the grief of their creators, and in doing so, they have made their pain eternal and it transcends them, and both have to find a way to live with that and be better than those that made them. The real revelation here is Jacob Elordi, who is absolutely fantastic in his role as the creature. This is completely different to anything Elordi has played before, and he's totally and completely unrecognisable under all that exceptional makeup, including his low, guttural voice. Elordi plays the role with enormous subtlety and physical expressiveness, especially given the creature's limited vocabulary initially, as the creature's wounded innocence gives way to furious rage. It's that side that we first meet in the prologue. The creature shows up in pursuit of Victor and starts fighting his way through the ship's crew to get to his master with bone-crushing brutality. Elordi's already towering height is made imposing, and the creature is initially a monster, and that is our first glimpse until over an hour later, where we truly come to understand him. Del Toro retains the framing device with a Danish fishing vessel who finds Victor, and the film is split between two main sections from each of the protagonist's perspectives. Some might find that frame with Horizon to be unnecessary, but it's clear that that perspective shift is something that Del Toro believes is absolutely fundamental to the story. We have to see things from Victor's point of view and see the monster that way as well, so that we can realise just how wrong he was when the creature tells it. Frankenstein is fundamentally a tale of hubris. He is a modern Prometheus after all, and the captain has to see himself in the tale of Victor's destruction. If the creature is a manifestation of Victor's pain and vengeance towards his father, it ultimately follows in his footsteps, as his even more brutal rejection itself corrodes into retribution. The creature is furious at his master for not wanting to be made, but unable to die, and experiences life as a series of brutalities and rejections from those who are horrified at the very sight of him, with no possibility of release. Even the kindness he finds is often met with shocking violence, like a sweet scene of a deer bloodily interrupted by hunters. He's assembled out of the corpses of soldiers and wears their uniform as if a soldier in Victor's battle with death or fighting a war with life itself. There's a moment where the creature is temporarily killed, which he describes as silence, and then unbearable life, as his injuries heal themselves and return him to his tortured existence. One of those kindnesses is a blind man, a member of that hunting family, played by David Bradley, who befriends the creature and teaches him how to read and speak, helping the creature express himself. That's another Pinocchio connection, because Bradley voiced Geppetto in that, so it only makes sense that he plays the closest thing the creature has to a supportive father that allows him the tools to live, and takes pity on him because he's unable to judge him by seeing. Again, it's a small but pivotal role, but Bradley gives some much needed warmth. And that's what's so heartbreaking about the creature, and what Elordi's performance exemplifies so well. He has so much love to give, but he's constantly aware that he is an abnormality, and it makes him so isolated and alone when so few can look past him, and if he cannot be loved, he will choose hate instead. As you'd expect from Del Toro, the movie looks absolutely phenomenal, with these huge, enormous gothic sets, particularly at the castle where Victor does his experiment, which looks reminiscent of the setting of Crimson Peak. The production design is absolutely exemplary, and it is a constant treat for the eyes. You rarely get to see filmmaking on this kind of epic scale, but Del Toro puts everything on screen and finds beauty everywhere, even in dissected corpses and anatomy. Del Toro is an impeccable visualist, and the violence, when it does arrive, is absolutely brutal, but are quick, sudden shocks. And this is extremely gory in places, but without being excessive. You get the impression that Del Toro has been sitting with this for so long that he's just throwing the kitchen sink into this. It's a dense film in terms of themes and images that might take a few viewings to digest all of it. There's loads of Christ and religious metaphors throughout the film, especially when the creature is reanimated in the crucifixion pose, itself a reference to an earlier scene where Henrik witnesses Frankenstein's demonstration, so Del Toro gets to even turn him into a literal messiah. Where I think this sometimes impacts is in the writing, which I do think shows some strain from trying to juggle all of these big ideas together. This is a story that has so many shifting viewpoints that Del Toro even contemplated splitting it into multiple films, and sometimes it does feel like it's trying to do so much that it doesn't all sit, but you always admire the ambition of it. And Del Toro has never been subtle, and I mostly mean that with affection, because I love how grandiose this movie is, but there is a moment where Victor is told directly to his face that he is the monster, which, yeah, I probably could have lived without spelling it out so directly. I think the audience has figured that one out. That line is a real clunker that should have been snipped, and it's hard not to think of the Garth Marenghi quote about writers who use subtext in that particular moment. That one moment aside, I enjoyed Frankenstein wholeheartedly. It's Del Toro pouring himself into the ultimate example of sympathy for the monster. Is it Del Toro's very best? I personally don't think so. I think that Pinocchio and Pan's Labyrinth are his masterpieces, but he's made so much excellent work, of which this is one of them, and it's always a delight to watch one of his films because there's so much passion and artistry on screen. For a story about death and suffering, Del Toro finds so much life in it, exploring ideas of sins of the father, living, and forgiveness. It is doing so much that it doesn't completely succeed at all of it, but this is the biggest of swings. It's big and wickedly entertaining, and the biggest tragedy of all is that most people are going to see this at home on Netflix rather than on a cinema screen, because it deserves to be seen in the biggest form imaginable. Again, this isn't Del Toro's best film, but it is, I would argue, the most Del Toro film. If you like this review and you want to support my work, you can give me a tip at my Ko-fi page, or my YouTube Super Thanks feature, which is right below the video. Or you can help support my mad science over at my Patreon, where you can see my videos early among other perks, including access to my Discord server. And you can also join YouTube memberships for similar perks. Or you can just simply like, share and hype the video. It all helps. Until next time, I'm Matthew Buck, fading out.